now we're going to have Paul Montone, who's been doing this for about the last 7 years, has quite a bit of experience in orthopedics as well. He's going to go through very similarly how he kind of starts his process and how he wraps up the winning foundation. There you go, Paul.
Thanks, Tim. I guess I'll come on the call here like I usually come on our weekly conference calls, and I'll say Paul is here. But thanks for having me on, Tim. I appreciate it. So I'm going to, just for, I guess, my own, the way I tend to retain information is through bullet points. So the setting up a winning validation that I put together, I kind of put 10 steps down on paper. And I'll just kind of run through each of the steps. I'm not going to elaborate all that much on each of the steps, because for each step that I give you, there's probably another 3 paragraphs that I can go on and on about the strategy behind each. But for time purposes, we'll kind of try to keep it clear and concise. Just a little bit of background on me. I've been here for about 6 years, and I think the reason why I had some early success with orthopedics is because that's all I had to sell. I was on the Aquamana side, and just by necessity, I was in a lot of orthopedic validations. So I know the game has changed a lot. When I started, there was no TXA, there was no bundled payment. So the game has changed completely. It's become even harder and harder to sell our technology. So one of the number one things that our device is put to the test on is the economic value. So the first bullet point I have is, and like Joe said in his talk, probably the most important part of a validation is targeting. If you don't have the right surgeon or the right economic story, you're just going to be wasting a lot of time. So I found through going to the blood bank, you could find out a lot of great information about who uses a lot of blood. And if you find a surgeon that's using a lot of blood, you have a really, really good economic story to tell. Like I said, with TXA coming into the marketplace, transfusion rates have definitely gone down. I think that the conversation, though it's not eliminated, it can definitely transition from transfusion rates now to redirecting patients. In the bundled payment system, I think that's really where we can impact the care pathway and the economic story by redirecting patients from SNF directly to home care. Some of the data that I use a lot, as I'm still learning this new bundled payment strategy, but talking about the Premier data that we have, even prior to the Premier data, I would use a lot of the Cleveland Clinic study that shows a great reduction in transfusion, and also with the Premier data, also shows a really good, not necessarily the Premier data, that is actually in the Cleveland Clinic study, a significant retention in H&H levels. So when it comes to talking about redirecting patients and how we can keep patients more healthy, I think that tells a really, really good economic story. So that first one is targeting. Second step, I think the key is a very, very good office demo. Use videos, and in this process, this is where you're going to identify what the win is with your surgeon. Now, keep in mind, I think that the win that you identify early on can definitely change throughout the process. I've been in many validations where transfusion was the talk track that I really led the surgeon down that path just for the pure economic reason. But we ended up closing the deal on reduction in hematomas or retention of H&H levels. So you definitely want to identify the win, but keep in mind that win can be fluid and change throughout the process of your validation. In that office demo, I think Damon Drainville does this probably better than anybody, but sell everybody in the hospital and sell everybody in that office demo. I have not only the surgeon, typically I'll have the surgeon use the device first, but in that office demo, I'm trying to make friends with everybody. And you'll be surprised when you engage the secretary and the coordinator in the office, have them come over and spend some time with them to put their hands on the technology, how much they appreciate you investing the time to educate them, and how much chatter that will create around the technology. And I think that indirectly that will makes a big difference with the surgeons. The next step after the office demo is I'll always go in and prep the OR staff that we're going to be trialing the technology. Try to educate and get everybody on board to the process that's going to be happening, and basically get them to support your cause. In the first case that you validate, that you'll be surprised, but in the first case that you have, the lion's share of all the questions are going to come out in the open. The surgeon's going to ask you everything about the technology, what's it used for, where is it used for. Everything that really wasn't addressed in the office demo, which usually there's a lot, will come up in that first case. And I think that the first case is just a huge, huge opportunity to not only sell the surgeon on the technology, but sell everybody in the entire room on the technology, from anesthesia to the coordinators. And usually in that moment is also where your adversaries will come to light. Typically, when you are hit with objections, or if you identify somebody that's not real fond of our technology, I tend not to be too confrontational unless I need to be in the OR. It can get very uncomfortable. I've gotten uncomfortable before, but I feel the best strategy is to play it cool, identify those people, and after the first case, try to sidebar them and have a real conversation one-on-one to neutralize anybody that could possibly be talking, smack, for a lack of better words, when you're not there. Because that's definitely something that happens when we're not there, is people talk about our technology, and the less people you can have talking bad about it is going to be to your advantage. So that's the first case. The next thing that I do, well, it's not the next thing that I do, but part of the process is I always track patient data. I think that it's a great way, even if you're not going to necessarily use it with the surgeon, it's a great way for you to know if the surgeon is using the technology properly intraoperatively. A lot of these cases, you really don't know. You don't know if he's hitting the right treatment areas, or if he's using the device properly. So if you're tracking patients from the back end and you're seeing the results, you can use those results to drive better usage and hone your proctoring. Not to mention that tracking the data is super helpful if you're going to actually use it to present to the doctor. Now, sometimes that needs to be set up on the front end, but it's something that I always just did and use that data throughout the validation process to constantly check back in with the surgeon, give updates, tell them how patients are doing. I would actually follow that first patient after our first case up to the ortho floor, because that gives you a great lead-in to introduce yourself to the nurse manager. Tell them that you just finished a case with Dr. XYZ. You're up here because you're going to be following the patient that he's using the device on, and if you can get his or her support in collecting the information. They might look at you kind of bug-eyed because they're like, why is the guy that sells the device in the OR coming up here on the ortho floor? And I think that's where you can take the opportunity to connect the dots of how we impact patients post-operative. All right. And then that's pretty much it. It's just, and then you're just repeating the process. Really, it's just a process. once you've done that first patient, depending on the guidelines you set out with the surgeon, it could be 5 cases, could be 10 cases. Obviously, the more cases you can get, the better odds we're going to have to show the effectiveness of our device. But we live in a real world, and it's not always a real situation to get 10 cases. So I guess I would say just do the best that you can with what you have. The shorter the cases, the shorter a number of cases, the more diligent you need to be with your proctoring, the more in tune that you need to have every part of the process and the validation. You just have to have that that much more buttoned up to make sure that you get a win. I think that's it, Tim. I don't know if I really have anything else.
No, I think you nailed it. Before I get into the question and answer portion of the call, first off, thank you, Joe and Paul. Great information. What I liked about really both your talks is that you both had a plan and also a consistent process that you follow on each and every one of these validations. And I think ultimately that's why you've been able to win in orthopedics. One of the quotes I heard from Joe that I thought was interesting was the role of the sales rep of really being an artist, and you have a blank canvas, and you're there really to paint the picture. Because there is a portion that's outside of the economic piece that's conceptual, so I thought that was very powerful. And then to Paul, refer to the fact the game's changed. Well, the game is continuing to change, and also that his ability to go in and sell to everyone involved. You never know whose level of influence in those early meetings, who has the higher level of influence. I really like hearing that. I think that's very, very important. But great information. So right now, I'm going to open it up. If you guys want to take off mute and fire away any questions that you have for Joe or Paul.
Damon Dreamville here. Great job, both you guys. I appreciate the plug, Paul. But you've actually been here an extra year. You said 6 years. Paul's been here 7. So give yourself all the credit you deserve. But
appreciate that.
In a quick answer, for each of you, what do you guys think is the best thing that you do, whether it's the quality you naturally possess or part of your process that's enabled you to have success? And then if you want to answer a second question of has there ever been a time in a trial where it's going so well that you end it early and move to close early, or because the doctor or something changes throughout the trial? Paul?
So, Damon, you like golf. So I'm going to give you, I know you like your hybrid club, so I'm going to give you kind of a hybrid answer. For me, I would say that I'm never going to walk away from the close. There's a lot more color that would need to come around the situation, a lot more questions that would need to be asked. But for me, if I was in a validation where I was tracking data and the surgeon was like, I've seen enough, this is good enough for me, I would definitely go for the close. And again, it depends if you're going to committee, if the device is already on the shelf. There's so many more questions to that. But I typically, I've seen it before, where I've closed, gone for the close, the commitment, preference cards and all that, but I just continued to track data. I continued to do what I did normally, but I just captured the close earlier on and continued to work the process. I didn't let it dictate and change, the actual validation. I just tried to stack on top of that validation even more so. So, I don't know if that makes any sense, but...
Yeah, it does. And then knowing you, if you wanted to close early, you would probably just be like, well, we need to do 10 cases, so why don't we evaluate hips now that we by knee, something like that.
Exactly, yeah. Like you say, you're always trying to capture more and more. So if you've seen enough on hips, then hips, let's go to knees. It's kind of like EP now, where okay, you love the plasma blade, well let's see Aquamanus in the pocket. So DW all day, right?
Yeah, you want to spell that out for everyone else?
Oh, deeper and wider. Deeper and wider.
Hey, Sandra, I have a question for both of you.
Shoot away.
I think I know the answer for Joe, but Paul, are you charging for your evaluations, and how are you getting that done if you're getting some pushback on that?
If I'm on the shelf and it's not an issue, I'm just pulling them from the shelf. Typically, if I'm already on the shelf where there's paid validation, I usually don't like to waste any more time going through any more processes. Usually when you start billing for devices, it just holds things up. So I don't look at the short-term money. I'm all about getting it in, getting it done, and then getting that auto business rolling. I'm not a big fan of bill onlys. Don't like paperwork. So, I typically don't worry about that I can't talk today. I typically don't worry about the short-term revenue. But yeah, if it's on the shelf and it's not an issue for the surgeon, I just pull them from the shelf.
Is that if you're not going to pay for it in the evaluation, I mean, it's going to be harder to pay for it once it's on the shelf. But to Paul's point, if it's already on the shelf, then I charge every time.
Yeah, I think that, Joe, that strategy can be good with kind of vetting the surgeon early. If you put that price barrier up in front of them right away and they're not willing to do that, then maybe you save yourself some time. I mean, on the flip side of it, I guess you don't know what you don't know until you don't know it. How is he supposed to justify something that he has no idea what the true value is? So that's the other side of it. You know what I'm saying? So again, you got to kind of know your accounts and know each situation, because every situation is different, and that's why you all are pros and all that. So, but yeah.
Thanks, guys. That's awesome.
No problem.
Hey, Paul, it's Robbie in Tampa. What's up?
Hey, Robbie.
Hey, you mentioned the blood bank earlier. I doubt they have very many reps calling on them. How have those conversations been? I mean, are they generally positive, or do they ever feel threatened that we have a product that would essentially create less work and not have a need for them?
Oh, that's funny. I never really thought of it that way. But yeah, no, I mean, the other side of that, where it's not creating as much work for them, yeah, that's funny. I don't know about that one. It's never come up, but it is kind of I sold beds for a long time before getting into this, and I just got really used to working with the floors and various departments. So the top track is kind of similar to the blood bank as it is going up on the floor. A lot of times you get bug eyes because they're like, well, I don't understand. Why are you here? And even more so in the blood bank, because they're look at you like, why is this guy here? This is just really, really weird. And so you just really got to say, I know this seems weird, but just let me explain to you why I'm here. I sell a device in the OR, but I'm standing here in the blood bank. And that's where you got to kind of walk them down the path of what the end game is for the device. We reduce transfusion rates. We retain H&H levels. So the device is here. It's in the OR. The reason why I wanted to come tell you about it is because people that use more blood probably would be able to see a lot of value out of this device, because it's much better to keep the blood in the body than it is to give it back. Obviously, you can tailor that pitch, but it's just about, people buy from people who educate. So you just have to go in. You can't ask for a lot of information up front, and you give to get. And so you go in there, educate, you befriend. Maybe you don't go in right away on the first meeting and start to ask, because some of these blood banks, they can drill down to the exact surgeon, exactly how much they transfuse, annually, like they can break it all down. It's unbelievable. But can you get all that information on a first meeting? Maybe, maybe not. Depends on how good you are. But maybe on a second meeting, maybe on a third meeting. Same sales game. It's just building relationships, building trust. And the more trust you have, the more information you'll gather. But so I guess to the point to your question, did I answer it? Like, you just got... Did I answer your question? Or?
No, that's what I was thinking of, the talk track and kind of just not crossing the line and feeling...
The threat,
like,
right?
Yeah, like I'm threatening them, but more of just information gathering, like you said. I mean, that's really why I'm here.
Maybe my ignorance is bliss, but I never really even thought about that, and it never come up as far as it being a threat or whatever. I think that all the blood banks are, they're trying to actually use less blood. So, but it would be an interesting story.
That answers my question.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, to piggyback on what Paul said real quickly, Damon again, the blood bank, they are all in disarray. They are all having issues with needing to give too much blood and not having enough. And you essentially are their savior. You just have to go in and let them know that. Like, my entire platform is designed to keep the blood in the body, so we're on the same team. And however you want to word that, it doesn't really matter, but they can all use our assistance. And just like Paul said, go in soft, and they're not used to getting called on by salespeople, but they will open up. It's one of the easier sales calls.
Any other questions out there while we have Joe and Paul?
Hey guys, how's it going this afternoon?
Good. More questions?
Hey,
Shoot away.
Yeah, this is Kevin in Lafayette, Louisiana. I was wondering if, try to be detailed in these evaluations as far as number of cases, tracking data. Do y'all have an optimal treatment time in each specific area that if the doctor's saying, well, how long do I use this? Maybe it's posterior cap. Do y'all have a certain amount of time that y'all try to shoot for overall throughout the case, like in a total knee?
Yeah, I'll take that first. For me, I always go 30, 30, 30, 30. So 30 seconds in each quadrant. And that's medial. So on the medial side, superior, inferior. And then on the lateral side, superior, inferior. Working the corners, working towards the midline, right? That's usually what I push for. You'll probably end up getting around 15 seconds in each quadrant. So obviously there's other areas to treat, but when we're talking about treating before implants are put on, that's kind of like the four areas. 30 seconds in each corner. Superior, inferior, work up under the condyles, behind the tibial plateau, on each side. And I feel like when you give them the kind of those four corners, it kind of gives them a good visual guide to work off of. I use the Scuderi video a lot. I think that video does a really good job. Ideally, if you can get them, as you're working through, because like you said, things are fluid in this process, and depending on how a guy is retaining the information, if you feel like you can push, I'll even go, hey, look, the ideal situation is to treat inflection and extension. So, 15, you back it down to 15 seconds in each corner in inflection, and then you bring it down to extension, get the lamina spreaders in there, distract, and then another 15, 15, 15, and 15. That's like creme de la creme. But again, it's easier said than done. But so for me, like 30 seconds in each corner, because they're never going to give you that. And I pulled the stopwatch on them. And I put that in as part of my, that's another good point. In my validation, I always notated the total treatment time in per patient in my validation. So then if you go in the patient, you're tracking data and the patient transfuses, you can always pretty much correlate that with treatment time. And that's how you can use it as a proctoring tool to to have them give you more time. You know, okay, look, we transfused here, but also notate that you only treated 30 seconds. And again, you just repeat that process, working towards great treatment.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. That's what I was looking for as far as like correlating it with the patient results. I feel like we could do a whole lot better if we have that data with how long
No, for sure.
What the patient, what the what.
Any other? We're right at 5. Any other last minute questions? Perfect. Well, again, thank you everyone for your participation, and thanks again, Joe and Paul, for presenting your experiences, and thank you everyone for joining the call.